Hello, fellow Hodophiles, and welcome to the Get Stamped podcast. My name is Danny, and I'm obsessed with all things travel, language, and culture. Grab your passports and get stamped as we take you on a journey around the world, exploring different countries, their cultures, and the languages spoken there. We will also be chatting with some of the coolest people about experiences that they've had and adventures they're about to embark upon. We believe that travel is not just about visiting new places, but rather about the experience as a whole. So make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full upright positions and join us on this journey of discovery as we explore this diverse world together. Hi, and welcome to the first episode of Get Stamped podcast. This is a podcast about travel, language, and culture. I finished recording my first episode with a guest a few days ago, and I am super excited to get that edited and get that out. But before doing that, I wanted to get on here and introduce myself and just get this thing started so that you have a little bit of an idea of what to expect with this podcast as well as with Stamped in general. So Stamped Adventures is my passion project as of right now, and this Get Stamped podcast is just an element of that, basically a branch and a way to communicate with people, a way to communicate with like-minded fellow travelers. So yeah, I just thought it would be really fun to get on here and talk about some of the adventures that I've had, talk a little bit about how my interest in travel grew, where it came from, as well as get into chatting with different people from all over the world to talk about their adventures, their culture. We'll also talk about tips and tricks on traveling that'll just kind of go hand in hand with my blog, and we'll also discuss some language tips as well. So if you're looking to learn another language, or if you're just interested in the nuances of language, then this is the right place for you. So let's just get started. A little bit about myself. My name's Danny, or Danielle. Either one is fine, and I am originally from a small town in Ohio, and I grew up between small town Ohio as well as small town Arkansas, so I'm half Yankee, half Southern, and depending on who I'm talking to, my Southern accent might come out a little bit, but yeah, most of my childhood was spent bouncing back and forth between Arkansas and Ohio. My dad's family is from Arkansas, while my mom's side of the family is from Ohio, and we moved back and forth quite a bit. The longest I ever stayed in one place as a child or a teenager would have been about probably my high school years. Before that, as far as I can remember at least, we would usually move roughly every 2 years. We would, move to Arkansas to be close to my dad's side of the family, move to Ohio to be close to my mom's side of the family. So that was about the extent of traveling that I got as a child, and it was good. I am very appreciative of having been able to grow up in both areas. So I understand Arkansas and the good and the bad of that place, as well as Ohio, and there are pros and cons to both places. But other than that, my parents didn't really travel. They're still not really travelers. Since becoming an adult, my mom has gone a couple of places. My dad might have been on a plane once or twice. I don't actually know. They're not huge travelers. It's not a passion of theirs, we'll say. And so it took me a while to kind of get an idea of where it really came from for me. And the more I thought about it, I think it stemmed mostly from books. So I was an avid reader growing up. I read, at times, one novel a day, sometimes a novel and a half. So, I went on adventures in another sense. I traveled to different places, and went on different adventures, we'll say air quote adventures, via books. And honestly, the more I think about it, I really think that that's where my interest at least started. Reading about different places and cultures and things like that. I think it just kind of sparked an interest in actually seeing them for myself. So that's my my best educated guess on where that passion comes from. I ended up graduating from high school in Ohio, and from there I decided I wanted to go away for college. My 18-year-old self was dating a guy at the time who was in the Marine Corps, and he was stationed in Hawaii. So of course, 18-year-old Danielle was like, yeah, we're going to Hawaii. That's where I'm going to college. And I ended up applying for Hawaii Pacific University, I believe, and I got accepted, and I was convinced that I was going to Hawaii. But then the realization that you actually need money and a way to get there, that kind of hit me towards the end of my senior year. So I ended up not going to Hawaii and ended up taking the acceptance letter from Arkansas State and going that route. I did not intend on going back to Arkansas. Even though I had family there, I was still about an hour and a half to maybe 2.5 hours to my grandmother. So I was close enough, but I was also on campus and just kind of on my own there. I had a cousin who was in college at the same time. We hung out a few times, but for the most part, I was on my own and, kind of had to find my own way. And while I was there, I don't remember exactly how I got to know the International Student Association, but somehow I did. I had a lot of friends from all over the world and became a part of that, even held an office, I think it was secretary or something. But yeah, friends of mine and we, held positions in the International Student Association, and we held events and things like that. And even when I wasn't in office, other people that I knew were, and I was still very active with it. And I just, honestly, when I think back to that time in my life, the ISA or International Student Association was probably one of my favorite things about college. I got to meet people from everywhere. I was able to help some of them, kind of, guide them around campus and get them used to campus culture and such. So yeah, just getting to meet people and learn about them and, see aspects of their culture and things like that. It was so fascinating to me, and I just loved it. I truly love the differences in people. I think diversity and varying opinions and varying culture and different languages, just everything about that, I feel like that's such a strength that I wish was more recognized as such. Yeah, just like when you think about the different ways that people live and the different experiences that people have had and get to know people on a different level, it's so cool. I just think it's so cool, and that's part of what sparked this podcast. And I'm also going to be doing YouTube videos of the podcast, but also of other things as well. And yeah, I just want to bring some of these people that I know, as well as people that I might not know yet, bring them on, talk to them, let people get to know them, get to know their culture, maybe share different aspects of it. And yeah, just kind of, highlight differences and diversity and culture and language and travel and all of that. So just kind of putting all my passions into one spot and trying to bring some other people along. So I think that it's going to be super fun. Like I said, I've already spoken to one person for the podcast. She got me inspired to rush and do this a little bit faster because she was moving away. So episode 2, you'll get to hear all about her story, and I'll talk about who she is and all of that. But it was so exciting to finally sit down and make this dream a reality, we'll say. So yeah, I'm just super excited. When I was in college, we'll just continue a little bit more with my story. Not only was I a part of the International Student Association, I also got the opportunity to study abroad. It took me a couple of attempts and a couple of applications, a couple of years to be able to do it, but I was finally able to make it work financially and with my schedule. I think it was 2007 maybe. I'm not 100% sure on the year. But yeah, so I finally was able to make that work, and I was able to go on a study abroad program to Spain. So Arkansas State University, which is the college that I went to, or they had an intercambio, or like an exchange program with a university in southern Spain. So it was in a city called Huelva, which is about an hour south of Sevilla or Seville. And I applied and got accepted and was able to use a little bit of student loan money to finance that trip. So I had to get everything together pretty quickly. And this was going to be the second time I was ever on a plane and the first time that I had ever gone abroad. So here I was, I think I was 20, and I was, getting to basically live out this dream that I had had for so long. Now, when I was in high school, brief detour back, when I was in high school, I studied Spanish and I fell in love with the language. Most of that came from the movie Selena. And yeah, I don't know, something about that movie and her music inspired me to want to learn the language. And so I studied Spanish in high school. I thought I knew a few words, but once going to Spain, obviously I didn't know as much as I thought I did. But my high school teacher at the time, I won't name names, but I remember asking her a question about the vosotros form. So rural Ohio Spanish teacher, she, taught what was most likely to be used around here, and that did not include vosotros because it's primarily used in Spain. So she didn't teach vosotros, which makes sense. But I remember, being the inquisitive student that I wanted to understand what it meant. And so I went to her desk. I have such a clear memory of this, and it's fascinating when I think about it. It's fun to analyze. But so I went back to her desk. Her desk was at the back of the classroom, and we had just finished a grammar lesson. And I asked her, I said, I know we don't need to know this, we don't need to know it for tests or anything like that, but can you just explain to me, like, what is this? What is vosotros? When would you use it? And why aren't we learning it, basically? And she told me that I didn't need to know it because it was only used in Spain and that I would never go to Spain. And thinking about that phrase as an adult, it's part of why I teach now, part of why I lean into my role as a teacher, because most people who would have heard that phrase come from an adult, especially a teacher, would have taken it to heart. And I'm sure there are things that were told to me that I did take to heart, but for some reason this one I didn't. And I took it more as a challenge, and that just speaks a little bit to, my stubbornness. But yeah, she told me that I would never go to Spain. And then, fast forward to 2007 or whatever year it was, here I am, landing. Like, I remember sitting on the plane. I was in a window seat, and we were coming in for landing. And I remember looking out the window at the tarmac, at the ground, and thinking, that's Spain. Like, that's not the US, that's Spain. This is a whole different continent, a whole different country. And just being so excited and nervous and all of the emotions. This is Ozzie, by the way. He will probably be a guest regularly. Yeah, so there I was, going to Spain and landing, and that was just surreal in and of itself. I'll probably have an entire episode just to talk about my study abroad experience in Spain. But yeah, so there I was in Spain, and I stayed there for a semester, and we had a Spanish class, so I was able to dive deeper into the language and learn a lot more. I finally learned what vosotros meant. It is, I like to describe it as y'all, so you all, multiple people, informal, so y'all. That's what I tell my students. But I learned that finally, X amount of years later, and I also studied literature there, Spanish literature, which was both super, super hard and also super just, what's the word? Inspiring. Like, I completely fell in love with Spanish literature. A lot of that had to do with probably two things. One, my passion for reading, but also the passion that my instructors had at that time. Like the professors that I had in Spain, the literature professors, were probably some of the best professors I ever had. And I still think about those classes and still wish that I could re-experience that. So that was an amazing point in my life. Not only because of, the classes and the fact that I was in Spain, but I also, this was my first time traveling, my first time being outside of smaller towns. The college town that I went to school in, it wasn't a tiny town, but it wasn't a city either. So this was, my first time being out of that small town United States atmosphere. And I was, pretty much on my own. I had a couple of people from my university that were there. We weren't super close at first. We ended up getting to become friends while there, but when I first got there, we didn't know each other very well. And so I was really quite alone. And even then, as challenging as that was, I really, I could see the value in it, and I took it for what it was. And while I had some really hard days, I also had some really amazing days. I learned how to trust myself. I learned that I really could do anything that I wanted to do. Sometimes it required more work than others, but I could, and it was a very empowering experience that I stress and recommend and, encourage my students to try to do something like that, whether, it's study abroad or just traveling in general, either by yourself if you can, or with somebody else, that's fine too. But yeah, just really taking that step out of your comfort zone and learning how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's really the key to learning more about yourself and learning how to trust yourself and just empowering yourself, really. So I learned a lot of lessons in that trip. And once that ended, it was really hard for me to come back to the US. And there were a bunch of things that I didn't expect coming back, like reverse culture shock, which is, once again, another thing that I'll probably do an entire episode on, because it was such a fascinating experience that I just didn't know was a thing. But I came back after that semester ended, and I finished my degree. After I finished my degree, I was offered a position to teach Spanish at ASU. So I took it. I thought that was a great opportunity, and it was. And I ended up teaching Spanish at Arkansas State for, I think, just one semester. I ended up getting a flyer in my teacher's box, or my, instructor mailbox, that was to be passed out to students. And it was an opportunity for people who met certain criteria to go to Spain and teach English at grade schools and middle schools. And while I did pass along the information to my students, I also thought, I meet these requirements. And I took that as an opportunity for me to go back to Spain. And so I ended up applying for the program as well and got accepted and went back. And I ended up living in a different town this time. I lived in Fuengirola, which is a town outside of Malaga. So both of the times that I lived in Spain, I was in the south in Andalusia. And I was just super excited to go back. So I went back, taught English at a grade school. That was a really interesting experience. And then, I was there for about a year at that point. Met some incredible people. You know, one of my favorite things about traveling, especially living abroad, like, I would love to live, in a different country every year or so. I think that would be an amazing experience. But one of the things that I just absolutely love about it is just meeting people. And it's especially cool when you have a second language or third. You speak multiple languages and you're able to meet them in their language, in their culture. And yeah, so I met some really awesome people that I'm still friends with, both trips, both times I lived there. And yeah, it was extra hard coming back that time because I had really, made a life in Spain. And I could totally see myself living there long term. But I had made the decision to come back, and so I did. And I came back, moved back to Arkansas, lived there, I forget how long. And then from there, I moved to Atlanta, lived in Atlanta for several years, loved Atlanta. That is, it's a super cool city. And then left Atlanta, ended up back in Ohio. That's a whole story. But yeah, ended up back in Ohio where I never expected to live again, yet there I was. And got to get, close with my family again and all of that. I ended up bouncing around a little bit more between Arkansas and Ohio and have been back in the Ohio Valley. I've been back here for several years now. So this is actually the longest that I've been in one place ever in my life, which is funny for me to think about. But yeah, so I came back and ended up, connecting with my husband, and we live here now. Now, I don't know that this is a permanent place for me. I can't imagine that it is, just with my personality. But yeah, that's where I'm at now. A few years ago in, I want to say 2017, I was actually but informed about a job opening in Mexico. This is the other big adventure that I had as far as like working abroad. I had the opportunity to work with some people from my college, my university, Arkansas State. They were partnering with some people in Mexico to basically build and start the first American-style university in Mexico. And they needed somebody to basically develop and run the student activities and the residence life departments. Both of those I had a lot of experience in from college. I was an RA. I worked in residence life and with different activity departments, both in college and elsewhere, for many years. So it was something I was super excited about. And so I ended up applying for the job, and I got the job, and then I ended up moving to Mexico. Like I said, I want to say it was around 2017. I had never been to Mexico before that, and I took a job and just moved there. So that tells you anything about my personality. But yeah, so I ended up moving there. My husband, who was just a partner at the time, he went down with me as well. And that was my first time traveling with somebody, which was an interesting experience. Because before that, it was all solo travel. It was all, on my own, by myself, figuring it out. So this was the first time that somebody was actually going with me. And it was a really cool experience. I think that city is amazing. Like, there's so much there that is just really neat. Like, the culture I didn't really know what to expect, and I went without expectations because I feel like if you go anywhere or you do anything with super high expectations, you might be disappointed, versus if you just go somewhere or do something without any solid expectations, then most of what you're going to encounter is going to be positive. And so that's kind of how I went into that. And it was an incredible experience. It wasn't all good. The job ended up not working out as long term as I had planned for multiple reasons, but overall it was super neat to be in a new culture, to live in a new place, a new country, to be asked if I was Spanish because of my accent. That was funny to me, because my accent is nowhere near perfect, but I guess I had some, Spain dialect lingering. So that was cool. And yeah, I got to help build this university. Not physically build the university, but like work on these 2 departments. And yeah, I'll probably have an episode just about that experience as well. So yeah, so I was there, worked in Mexico, and then ended up coming back to Ohio, and I've been here since then. I currently teach. I am a Spanish instructor, and I teach college classes. And my main goals with my classes, other than, teaching them language, is to, also show them how much language and culture are all interconnected. Like, it's all a part of the same thing. And I think that is one thing that at least was lacking in my education, my language education growing up. So I try to, incorporate a lot of cultural elements and things like that. And it brings me a lot of joy to hear students say, "Oh, I didn't know that. That's so cool." Or to challenge their own thoughts and to just like explore outside of their little bubble. And, not every student picks up what I'm putting down, but those who do, it really brings me a lot of joy. Like, I have one student came to me earlier this year and told me that she is going to be doing a study abroad in Spain this summer, and she just wanted to tell me about it. And I'm so excited for her. I hope she comes back to tell me of her tales. And I have other students who, have gone to Germany or France for study abroad programs. And I love to see that, especially from people in a small town who grew up with teachers like I had, And this isn't every teacher around here. Obviously, there's some really amazing teachers here, but I have seen, both in my high school days as well as currently, I've seen elements of that, not just from teachers, but also from, adults in these students' lives. And yeah, I want to challenge them. I want them to see for themselves. I don't want them to hold themselves back because they don't need to. I grew up around here. I grew up in a family that didn't travel, and I still was able, to get out there and to explore and to do these things. And so I just like to, make sure that these students know that while it might be a little bit more challenging for them, while there might be hurdles that they have to overcome, that it's still totally doable, and that they should really follow their passions. And some people, some of them, they're not interested in language, they're not interested in traveling, and that's fine. It's totally fine. But for those of them who are interested, I like to encourage them to follow their dreams. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I am, working on Stamped Adventures and working on this podcast and working my teaching job and, just trying to get some travel in here and there. COVID derailed a lot of that, but I have a lot of things, a lot of plans that I hope to get rolling here soon. So yeah, I plan to take you guys along on the journey. And for all my fellow hodophiles, my fellow lovers of travel, I am excited that you're here. I am excited to hear about your stories, and I will see you / talk to you in the next podcast episode. Thank you.